Hi, I'm Angela H. Brown, Executive Director of Craft Lake City. Today, we're producing fun science videos for Utah students at schools in partnership with Google Fiber.
Hi guys, my name is Dr. Beth and I'm the STEM Manager for Craft Lake City. And we're really excited to be with you today to show you some fun things you can do with chemistry in your own home. I'm a scientist myself, and one of the reasons I became a scientist is because I loved chemistry. It's just really fun and fascinating to see how you can mix different things, even common things you might have in your kitchen, and see them change in really fun and wonderful ways. So today we're going to learn how you can grow crystals at home using things you have in your house or things that you can easily get at the grocery store. So the goals for today's activity are to learn what crystals are and how they form, and learn some of the differences between different types of crystals. So a crystal is a solid material where the molecules, the smallest parts of it, are arranged in a very ordered pattern, usually a geometric pattern, and they can be several shapes. And you probably are familiar with some types of crystals that you have at home, like sugar is a crystal. The salt that you put on your food is a crystal. There's also a lot of other examples of crystals in nature. These are two that I had in my house because I love rocks as well. This is a quartz crystal, which is you can see it's a very regular kind of almost square or cubic shape. And this is an amethyst crystal, and you can see that its shape's a bit different. It's more kind of like a triangular shape with the crystals kind of forming little spikes or peaks. So the way crystals are formed is when a solid substance, a pure solid substance, is dissolved in water to create what we call a supersaturated solution, which means that you dissolve as much of that material as possible in the water. And then crystals form either by cooling, by evaporation, or sometimes a mixture of both. So today I'm going to show you how to make two different types of crystals using common household materials. First, Epsom salt crystals. So Epsom salt is a salt that is, you probably know it as bath salts. It's a compound or chemical called magnesium sulfate. And it's very, very good for helping you relax in the bath after a long day, but it's also really fun to grow beautiful crystals with. You will need hot water, which you can either boil on the stove or just use very, very hot tap water. You'll need a measuring cup, a half a cup measuring cup, a container to mix the salts and the water to create your saturated solution, and something to stir it with. You might need to stir it for quite a long time. And then you'll need a container to pour the saturated solution into, and this will be the container in which you'll grow your crystals. So to start, you want to heat water. Again, you can boil it. If you decide to boil water on the stove, make sure that you have a parent or grown-up to help you. And even if you're using hot tap water, probably not a bad idea. So the first thing we're going to do is add half a cup of water, of the hot water, look how it steams, into this container. And then you add half a cup of the Epsom salt. And we're going to add this all to the water. Once you've added the Epsom salt to the water, you'll want to stir the solution until almost all of the salt is dissolved. You might see a few grains of it still on the bottom. And you probably are going to have to stir for a few minutes to get it all to dissolve. Let me take a look now. Okay, there's still a little bit left in solution. Like I said, with a saturated solution, you dissolve as much as possible. Okay, that looks pretty good. You can see that most of that salt is dissolved. Now, we're going to take this solution, we're going to pour it in a new container. And you want to be careful to make sure you just pour the clear part of the solution in the container and don't pour any of these little bits of salt that we weren't able to get to dissolve. Okay, so now we have our saturated solution of Epsom salt. We're going to grow crystals in this container, and like I mentioned, one of the ways crystals form is when a mixture, a saturated solution, cools. And so for the Epsom salt crystals, the next step is to put this in your refrigerator. And while it's in your refrigerator, the solution will cool and you'll begin to see crystals form. That usually will take a day or maybe two. So we're going to go put this in the refrigerator, and then we'll come back to our second crystal growing experiment. Okay, so now we have our Epsom salt crystals in the fridge. They're going to grow. In just a few hours you might be able to see crystals forming, but if you let them sit for a day or even two, you'll see even more. And we'll take a look at the kind of crystals that we'll get after we're done with this next experiment. So this next experiment, it shows you another type of crystal that is easy to grow at home, and it's using another type of chemical called alum. Alum is actually aluminum sulfate. You find this in the grocery store in the spice section, and people use it for pickling and other types of preserving food. But we're going to use it to grow crystals. You'll need hot water, either boiled or else very hot tap water. You'll need a container to make your saturated solution in. And I like to use a measuring cup because then I can just measure the water directly into the cup. And then you will need measuring spoons to measure out the alum. So first, we want to add half a cup of hot water to our mixing container. And next, we want to add 2.5 tablespoons of alum to our container. This might be difficult because it's kind of hard to... That's one. Two. And 2.5. And then, just like we did with the Epsom salt, we stir the solution, we stir the alum into the hot water until no more of it can be dissolved. So you'll want to stir it for several minutes. Okay. And now, we're going to pour this solution into a container and allow it to cool. For the alum crystals, you don't need to cool it in the refrigerator. You can just cool it anywhere in your kitchen. It's nice to have a lid on it so it doesn't get spilled accidentally. And then we'll set this to the side, and actually the alum crystals often will start forming even after just a few hours. So you might go back and check this in a few hours and see what has grown. But if you leave it for a day or two, you'll get even more bigger and larger and more beautiful crystals. Okay. Now we're ready to see how our crystals have grown. So we started with Epsom salt crystals, and then we also did the alum crystals. So first, let's take a look at the Epsom salt crystals. So these have been sitting in the refrigerator for about a day and a half. And so it's much easier to see the crystals if you pour off the remaining solution. Actually, you can see the crystals growing in the bottom. Some of them are really fine and thin. I put a couple of pebbles in the bottom of the jar because that sometimes can help the crystals to grow a little faster. So I'm going to carefully pour off the solution. And if you need a grown-up to help you with this, that's fine. Okay. So you can see that hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of little crystals have formed at the bottom of the jar. And if you'd like to keep your crystals for a while, they should stay like this once you've poured off the liquid. So they should stay, you should be able to look at them. If you have a magnifying glass or something like that, it can be really fun to take a look at these through that. So that's the Epsom salt crystals. Now let's take a look at the alum crystals. These you don't have to take them out of the water or of the solution to look at them. You can just kind of see how they've formed again on the bottom of your container. So now we've grown 2 different kinds of crystals. Let's take a look at them side by side and see how they are the same or how they're different. So first we have the Epsom salt crystals. And if you look closely at these, you can see that they're very fine and they almost look like tiny little needles and very small. If you look at the alum crystals, they're actually pretty different. They're not spiky, they're kind of flat. If you look closely, you can see that they're 8-sided crystals, so they're what we call an octagonal crystal shape. So by making 2 different kinds of crystals and then comparing them, we can see that different types of material result in different crystal structures. Well, I hope you've learned that it's easy and fun to grow crystals at home. We've also learned that to grow crystals, you need to mix your crystal growing substance, like the Epsom salt or the alum, into water to create a saturated solution, and what that means is that all the little bits of that substance are now surrounded by water and dissolved in the solution. Then, to create the crystals, that saturated solution is cooled or evaporates, and those little bits of the substance come together again to grow a beautiful crystal. One of the things we've learned as well is that different crystals have different shapes and properties. So our Epsom salt crystals are really different from the ones we grew with alum. And that's true of crystals you find in nature, because each crystal's structure is determined by the special properties of that chemical. So every crystal has its own unique and beautiful shape. I hope you've enjoyed learning with us today and doing chemistry in your own house. If you want to learn more about other fun STEM and science activities, go to craftlakecity.com. Thank you.